We are going to step into the afternoon segment of our presentations. And to get us started in that, I'm going to welcome Mark Geiger back up to the stage with the representatives from the 3 local nonprofit organizations as well.
Thank you for your vote so far. We have about 100 tokens, 300 tokens, hard to tell for about each different worthy charity that is already accounted for. As you can see, everybody over there is pretty much even. So there's still plenty of time for you guys to make a difference. Next to me, we have Journey, Rise, and Second Harvest Food Bank. To talk a little bit more about each of them. Journey provides recovery services for people dealing with mental health issues and substance use disorders. They serve all ages. They offer services in-home, at schools, as well as at senior centers. They help 12,000 people a year. Next is Rise. They focus on addressing mental health and wellness in children, adolescents, and families. And they help approximately 3,000 people in the Madison area every year. And then last but not least is Second Harvest Food Bank. Second Harvest is the area's largest hunger relief charity. With their partners, they provide 10 million meals annually to families and people in need. Voting is going to continue till approximately 3 o'clock. We want more votes. With your help, we can give $1,500 to the group that has the most tokens, $750 to the group that has the second most, and $500 to the third place finisher. Please give these charities a round of applause. Thank you.
And I would like to take a moment now to thank and recognize our partners of support. These organizations support WCWI, and with their commitment, we are able to fulfill our mission of being Wisconsin's premier resource for worksite wellness. We are so grateful for their support. Please join me in a round of applause in recognition of our sponsors. And one of the really cool opportunities that I think we have at our annual conference is that we are able to highlight some of the great work that's happening throughout the state of Wisconsin. And the Wisconsin Department of Health Services is one of those organizations that is a long-standing contributor to improving the health and wellness of people throughout the state. And today, I'd like to welcome John Morgan to the stage. He's going to share a brief update about the Wisconsin Worksite Wellness Toolkit.
Thank you, Marissa. I'm promoting this today. It's free. What a great idea, free gifts. So please come see me later. We'll get you all set up with a toolkit. So I want to talk about 2 things, the kit and then the small workplace wellness grant program, which is ending at the end of this calendar year. I'd also like to acknowledge the folks that helped me with this latest version of the kit. It's the 4th version. I think it's the best one because we had a lot of input from outside people. So if these folks could stand, thank you, Christina, Deb, Michelle, Tyler, and Barbara. So much better with people outside of state government providing input. So this is what's new in the latest version. This is the 4th one. It's actually been used in 21 other states as sort of a model, so we're fairly proud of it. But we changed sort of the intro piece and started talking more about the value of investment and getting away from ROI and just dollars and cents healthcare costs. We changed the lead-in for each, so for those of you who are really busy and don't want to read through the pages, these little snippets at the start sort of lay out the most important pieces, like how to get started, understand costs, get a diverse group for a wellness committee, and then some final thoughts. So you can get through this pretty quickly if you don't want to read it word for word. We do still think that worksite wellness is important. I show this slide most of the places I go. The reality is those settings, early care schools and work sites, are where people spend most of their waking hours. So it's a real good place to try and make an impact. And then this go around, as I said, we are focusing more on the employees so that you do get that feeling that it's not necessarily about dollars and cents, it's about the employees first. In the second and third steps, we've added some things. This is what's currently in there. So how to engage employees, and I think when I go to speak at various places, this is usually one of the topics that comes up. How do we engage more? How do we get greater participation? So there's a chapter on this and talks about intrinsic, extrinsic motivation, give you some ideas maybe on how better to engage your employees. Then the assessment section, still the same. If you haven't used it before, it looks at both the worksite environment and then how do you get input from employees, how can you use demographic data, et cetera. The programming piece is probably the one that most people open to first because they want to get ideas and strategies. We've beefed up the emotional well-being one considerably, and then we added a financial wellness section as well. So in the programming piece, again, we're still trying to hit on the idea of individual programming, environmental change, and policy change, and trying to combine strategies that will pull all three of those together to have the most impact. Steps 5 and 6, 5 is prioritizing. How do you make decisions on where you're going to spend your time? And then 6, are we doing any good? You know, what can you measure? And it depends on sort of what size work site you are and what you have access to in terms of data. So for decision making, we're putting a pretty big push on dose and reach. How can you reach the most people and provide constant number of doses as opposed to doing one-day events where you get one dose per employee and then they get nothing for 364 days besides the health fair. So this is the idea of how do you increase the number of doses. So participation rate times regular use of whatever you might be doing. And then the evaluation piece looks at those data markers. You can use your environmental assessment from the start and see how it's changed over the course of a year. And then we did create this go-around a scorecard for evaluation. So picking some key things that you might be able to put in your own evaluation scorecard, perhaps to show to management at the end of the year. So that's the first piece. Second piece, changing gears, is the workplace wellness grants. Some of you may be aware that these went into place in 2014. They were for small businesses. The program ends this December 31st, and unfortunately, we really have not got as many applications as we thought we were going to get. So the details specifically for the wellness grant is it's employers with 50 or fewer employees. They have to do a HRA, they have to do some sort of programming, and then they have to submit an application, which is an online form that we provided. The bad news is that we had $3 million a year for 4 years, or $12 million total, that we could have handed out to folks. And so far, we've handed out $91,000 of that $12 million. So time is running out. It runs out in the end of December, but if you know some small businesses, it's actually a reimbursement program. So if you've already done it and incurred costs, you can get reimbursed at 30% of those costs for a 12-month period. So if you work with or if you know some small businesses, encourage them to at least try and get at that pot of money before it disappears. And then if you don't see me for several years, it's because I embezzled what was left and will come back only after statute of limitations has run out. So here's my contact info. We're at display booth number 3, just inside the door. So if you want some free, did I mention it was free toolkits? That's where we'll be. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I know you've all been waiting for the annual election, so give it up for the election, right? So good afternoon. My name's Kathy Menard-Rothy, and I'm the Secretary of the Board of Directors for the Wellness Council of Wisconsin. As an order of business, our conference serves as our annual meeting of the members of the corporation and presents an opportunity to take care of important business, our annual Board of Directors elections. Based on the needs of the organization, WCWI's nominating committee recommends to the members of the corporation that the following 2 individuals be re-elected to WCWI's Board of Directors. Please stand as I say your name. Sarah Havens, I don't think Sarah's able to be here today, from Gunderson Health System, and Patricia Lenius, consultant PJL and Associates. Please signify your acceptance of the slate of candidates by saying aye. Any opposed? Congratulations. Additionally, we have 3 upcoming vacancies, and we're looking for talented, forward-thinking leaders throughout the state to join the Board of Directors. As we say farewell to 2 of our long-standing board members, Abigail Nadler and Monica Hinnick, whose terms end this year, we thank them for their service and leadership over the past 12 years. We would like to announce an open call for nominations for the WCWI Board of Directors. So if you have any thoughts of that, just come forward. And if you have an interest in learning more, thanks, Marissa. Please connect with Marissa Kalkman via email or phone, listed on the slide, or one of the current board members, to have a conversation about the opportunity and the role of a WCWI board member. We look forward to hearing from our current and future leaders regarding this opportunity. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John and Kathy. And now, I'm excited to introduce our next speaker. Many of you know him. Ryan Picarella, the president and CEO of WCWI, is here to talk with us today. And he's going to share some deep insight into the multi-year process and research-driven efforts that went into the evolution of the Well Workplace process. And he's also going to highlight how many of you in this room and WCWI were a part of that process and played a central role in where we are today, which is really exciting. So he will highlight how together we can break down the walls of traditional wellness programs to realign, refresh, and progress. So please join me in welcoming Ryan.
How about a huge round of applause for Marissa, the entire Wellness Council of Wisconsin team, and the Board of Directors. You guys are doing great work here, and it's always so much fun to come back. And I'm particularly excited about today because there's been a lot of change over the last couple years that I want to share with you. And so today is going to be really about the story of our evolution and thinking about the very beginning of not only the Wellness Council of Wisconsin, but the beginning of WCWI. and where we've come and where we're going. So we've got some really cool stuff. So I'm particularly excited about this. In Madison, what an amazing town. This is my first time here. I wish I had more time to enjoy the beauty, but it was really amazing to wake up this morning and to see the sunrise over the lake. So what a really special place this is. So here's the objectives today that I want to talk about. And the first couple, at least the first one will be very brief, is what is the Wellness State of the Union? And this is really kind of the beginning of the conversation for the case of change. Why do we need to change in the field? And what are some ways that we can all begin to sort of broaden our perspective on what wellness is in an organization and what it's not? The next piece there is review the evolution of WCWI and Wisconsin's role. You guys and the momentum here and the energy that you bring as a council and as a state truly is something remarkable. And you all have been a huge role, whether you know it or not, in kind of our evolution. We've been seeking feedback from you all for the last several years. And so I'm excited to share a lot of that change and your role in that today as well. Part of that is put a stake in the ground and saying, what is our definition of wellness? And what are some ways that we think we can impact that, really particularly in the workplace? And so kind of a fun activity. So there's maybe 600 people or so here today. And if we had more time or a smaller group, I'd say, okay, write down your definition of wellness. And we'd probably get maybe 600 or so different definitions of wellness. And so we had to come to a common consensus as to what that definition was, and not just what that definition is, but how do we begin to sort of measure that, benchmark that, and hopefully move forward in the future. Hopefully you've seen by now the evolved 7 benchmarks, and that has really been a foundation for WCWI, for you all, the Well Workplace Process, the Well City initiatives, the work that you've been doing. And so the Well Workplace Process and the 7 benchmarks has really been our tried and true for the last almost 30 years, 25 years or so. And so we've begun to sort of talk a little bit differently about those 7 benchmarks. And it's not a dramatic change. It's not going to be anything that's going to be a super surprise if you haven't seen them already. But we just thought a little bit different about how do we make these a bit more inclusive, and how do we sort of broaden the definition to have more of a cultural impact within organizations as well. And then the last piece here is share some new and exciting things that we plan on rolling out both this year and into 2019. All right. So why do we need to change? And the answer should be pretty obvious to you all, and I'm not going to beat up heat maps because I know that you all have seen these. But I think for the most part, we have spent a lot of our time focusing on these things on the left here. How do we manage obesity and diabetes and physical activity? How do we get people to move more, take more steps, eat better, eat more broccoli, get on the treadmill? But the reality is that we have continually had this decline in overall well-being. People are getting sicker. And it's not because they don't want to eat broccoli, it's not because they don't want to move, it's because we've had this massive decline in overall well-being in the country, and we've continued to sort of see a decline every year. I'm a big fan of Gallup's work, and it's interesting, we're based out of Omaha, Nebraska, and so is Gallup. So have the opportunity to sort of meet with their researchers a lot and talk with them, and actually we've got a gentleman that works at WCWI that we just brought over from Gallup. And it's interesting to see how they continue to look at, but the declining well-being, and that's where we're going to spend a little bit more of our time talking about today, and how can we have a bigger impact? Because if we can improve well-being, all the rest of the stuff will follow. People will want to move more, they will want to eat better, and it'll be a lot easier to manage the chronic conditions that we're facing if we can do that. You've probably all seen this before. This is an Old Towers Watson study that stress is the #1 workforce issue. They said ranking above physical inactivity and obesity, and again, those are symptoms, right? Those are symptoms of being stressed out. When you wake up, when you're stressed out, when you have high amounts of cortisol every single day, the likelihood of you wanting to move more, eat better goes down pretty significantly. If we're always in that fight or flight mode, it's not only harmful for our health, but it's also much, much harder to achieve our health and wellness goals. This is the reality. This is what we're facing here. So we are continuing to try to have an impact, but yet costs continue to rise and population health continues to go down. And unfortunately, this trend has been going on for years and years. And think about, wellness programs, and of course, every organization should be thinking about the health and well-being of its employees. The average incentive now is $600 to $800, depending on the size of the organization. 15, 20 years ago, it was about $25. So you would think that with that big of an increase in the amount of incentives that we're paying people, that people would be that much healthier. But again, that's not the reality either, that we're paying more for people to do the things we want them to do, yet the population health continues to go down. And a lot of this, and again, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, is that these are the result of choices that we make every single day. From the time we wake up to the time we go to bed, we get to make thousands of decisions about what to do with ourselves, how to respond, as MJ spoke about earlier, to situations, the lens in which we view the world, the food that we put in our mouth, how much we get on our feet, move around. All of this has a major impact on our health. And again, I know all of you know that. So is Worksite wellness the answer? And I think the gentleman that was up here before said, well, of course it is. We spend most of our time every single day at an office. We arguably spend more time with the people that we work with than our own families. We spend some of that time sleeping, some of that time eating, caring for others, possibly some time with leisure and sports. I wish I had 2.5 hours to do that every day. But the reality is that most of us spend our time working or thinking about work. And here's the thing, too, that's crazy, is that we are so plugged in now to work that I bet most of you probably sleep with your cell phone right next to your bed, right? So probably one of the last things you look at before you go to bed, just to make sure there's no burning emails you have. And what's the first thing you do when you get up? Probably look at your phone to make sure you're not going to walk into any fire drills. So really, you're working all the time. That constant buzz, that tick, whatever, we are spending all the time, way too much time, and most of you have probably heard of Luke Seward, but he talks about digital toxicity, that we are so plugged into work now that it's hard to get away from a lot of this. So lately, too, there's been a lot of interesting conversations about, well, what is the value of workplace wellness? So clearly it's a place to focus on. Clearly it's a place that we can have the biggest impact on people's health and well-being. But what's the ROI? What is the ROI of wellness? And this is one of the most interesting and probably heavily debated topics right now. This is a study from Getzel and a few others that was published several years ago about looking at the value of a healthy workforce. Then there's these things that come out. Here's something from Gallup. This is looking at, well, there's value to it, but why isn't anybody showing up to these parties? This is kind of interesting. So this looked at companies with 1,000 or more employees. The bottom line here is that only 24% of employees in companies of 1,000 or more folks are actually participating in the wellness program. And I would even argue that most of those 24% of people are people that are already doing the right thing. So the shocking part here is that, for those of you that are in a communications role that are constantly trying to communicate the value of the program, think about this. 60% of employees in these companies even know that they have a wellness program. Isn't that crazy? That just makes you, smash your head in the wall when you just try to communicate, and yet no one's listening. So what's the deal? Either people don't care, they don't want to participate, or they don't know about it. So what needs to change? And then there was this study. I'm sure you all probably saw this from the RAND Corporation that looked at over 600,000 employees and it basically made the conclusion that there is no ROI. So what's happening here? Why is there some ROI, there's not ROI? And then we start seeing press like this. Our wellness program's a shame. Why your workplace wellness program isn't working. The dark side of corporate wellness programs. Do wellness programs work? Usually not. So I'd like to stop and pause here for a second and say, okay, let's just forget all of this for a second. Do we honestly think that a sick and stressed out and unhappy employee is better than an engaged, healthy, happy person? Well, of course not. That we should all companies should really be thinking about employees as the key to their business success. It should be a business imperative. It is far beyond just saving medical cost dollars. We all know that. And again, a very important thing, prices are skyrocketing, but the value of a healthy, happy employee is much bigger than that of a cost avoidance ROI metric. And so I want to share some things today, and sort of our dream and our goal at WCWI is to really sort of flip this on its head, because I think everybody agrees that it's not only the right thing to do, but it should be a business imperative. And this is why we've really been thinking about how do we change as an industry. Because wellness shouldn't be something that employees just offer. It should be something that every employee demands, that they work for a company that provides them an opportunity to be their best selves every single day. Wellness programs shouldn't be seen as something that we have to do, or these hoops that we have to go through, or that we've got to do this, or they're going to tell me to wear my seatbelt more days a week, or I need to drink less drinks. It's not about that. It's about being able to work for a company that allows you to be your absolute best, that creates an environment that allows you to achieve your goals, not the company's goals, and to be healthy. And that's your version of healthy. The last thing I'll present is that the workplace, and some of you may have seen this is a professor out of Stanford that claimed that the workplace is the 5th leading cause of death in the US. Fifth leading cause of deaths. Now, a bit sensational, I would say yes, of course it is. But here's the flip side. If the workplace can be the fifth leading cause of death, why can't it be the number one cause of life? And so let's flip that on its head a little bit too, and let's all start thinking about our workplace as a place where people can go, they can be well, they can be healthy, they can do work that they want to do, and they can live a healthy, happy life. So that's a sad story. But the good news is that there's hope, and you guys are all have been and will continue to be a huge part of that. And so I want to share with you a little bit about the evolution of WCWI and how we've really been thinking about this very deeply for the last 4 or 5 years. So our beginnings was back in 1987, and you all have probably seen this picture if you've gone to the Wellness Council of Wisconsin's website. That is Bill Kaiser in the middle there, and he was our founder, and he happened to be friends with Lynn Bardelli, who was the founder of the Wellness Council of Milwaukee, which has turned into this. Bill died in August of 2017. He was 94 years old, and he was really a pillar in the community of Omaha. And fortunately, before Bill's passing, I had the opportunity to get to know Bill pretty well, and his son, John Kaiser, is actually still on our board of directors. So I've learned a lot through John about his father and his vision for the Wellness Council for the Wellness Council of America, and really for all the wellness councils, including yourselves. And what's interesting, and as I started going through, we did a tribute for Bill at our summit, which was in Omaha in 2017. And I started going back and reading all of Bill's old manuscripts, things that he wrote in the late 70s and the early 80s about why he wanted to do wellness. And so I'm not from the Midwest. I've been in Omaha for about 5 years. For about 5 years now, I started WCWI, it'll be 5 years next week. And there's a sense of community that I'm sure all of you share here in Wisconsin as well. That was amazing. And what Omaha lacks in sort of geographic beauty, it's not a very diverse state in terms of mountains, things like that, but there's an incredible sense of community amongst the people there. And Bill's vision for the Wellness Council of America was to create a council, and it wasn't about incentives and it wasn't about healthcare cost, it was about strengthening the community because he saw that sick employees were less engaged, they didn't want to show up to work, they were gone more, they weren't part of the community that Bill dreamed about. And it was really quite amazing to go back and to read these things like, wow, this is truly what this is all about. It's about connections. And you hear this all today about compassionate workforces. I think that theme has been repeated several times in several sessions today. And so it was really kind of interesting, and I feel like we're going back in a lot of ways to the roots of where we started, where it wasn't about programs. It really was about creating communities within organizations and to really strengthen the communities. So we had our charter in October 23rd, 1987. You guys were founded a little bit before that, and we were founded really out of his vision. So WellCom, which is the Wellness Council of the Midlands, was the first one that he founded in Omaha. You all were founded shortly after that, and WCWI, the original vision was that there would be hundreds of councils, at least 50, one for every state, that would really be the boots on the ground, that would work with the community, that would work with the businesses, that would help them and guide them through the well workplace process. And you guys have really been an exemplary example of what that vision truly was back in 1987. So it's kind of fun sometimes to go back. There's a really cool website called the Wayback Time Machine. If you all want to see like your original MySpace profile or something, to go back there and have a trip down memory bliss, you can put that in, your name in, you'll be amazed what is everything that goes online stays online, just so keep that in mind. This was our first website back in 1997, and you'll notice we were the Wellness Councils of America, so that was part of the original vision that we were back, back in time. What happened in March of 2000? So this is really the beginning of the Well Workplace Initiative, the Well Workplace process. And so we'd had some opportunities to work with organizations to understand what we thought that worked well, what didn't work well. Here's a picture of our website back in 2000. April 25th, 2003. Why is this date significant? Well, this is significant because this is when the Well Workplace Awards application went online. And so we really began to have sort of a very rich and arguably the most robust data set of any others looking at wellness companies and the trends over the last 15 years or so from this time. The original 7 benchmarks, also known as the 7 C's, and I'm sure all of you are intimately familiar with these as well. So capturing senior level support, creating cohesive wellness teams, collecting data to drive results-oriented wellness initiatives, crafting an annual operating plan, choosing appropriate health promotion interventions, creating a supportive health promoting environment, and carefully evaluating outcomes. Again, this has been sort of the gold standard for years now, and really what we've built and what you guys have been so successful in achieving incredible success within your organizations. So November of 2013, so this was about 5 years ago, and what happened significant then? I just said it a few minutes ago. This is when I joined the WCWI team. And so I joined November of 2013 and really wanted to understand what was working well for you all, what was working well in organizations, and how could we continue to meet the needs in the changing environment that wellness was, and how do we do things a little bit differently? And so this really began our journey of saying, how do we evolve? And about 6 months after I joined, I rolled out a strategic plan to our board of directors, and the first priority was to evolve WCWI. And this wasn't just about a new brand, it wasn't about a new website, it was saying we've got to change as an organization because what we're doing, there's a lot of great things we should be really proud of, but there's also some things that I think that we need to change too. And so we started this journey to reframe WCWI, and we really wanted to begin to understand what is our place in the future and how can we continue to serve you all and to help people be well in the future. And so what we did is the first thing is we started looking at the data. We formed an advisory council, and we asked many of you in the audience what you thought. And why did we do that? Well, over the years, you guys have achieved some incredible things. So since 2003, you've helped 333 organizations achieve a Well Workplace Award. Since 2005, Wisconsin represents 80% of the Well City initiatives throughout the country. That's truly remarkable. And when you can start with getting communities involved and getting communities, the results transcend the workplace. This is about our kids, this is about our families, this is about creating places where we can be proud of, where we can bring in the talent that we need to run our organizations, that our kids can be happy, healthy, be in schools. This is really quite remarkable, and you can see the various well cities over the years that have happened within Wisconsin. You've also impacted over 150,000 employees in Wisconsin through efforts from the local council here, which is also pretty amazing. 650 consultations, and you all represent over 500 organizations in the state of Wisconsin and have over 700 like-minded wellness professionals all sitting in this room today. You guys are truly the gold star for states that do this stuff, which is quite remarkable. So one of the things that we did when we started this journey was to sit down with a lot of the Well Workplace Award winners and say, okay, you're a Platinum Well Workplace. Do you feel like you're a Platinum Well Workplace? And if you do, tell me why, and if you don't, tell me why. And so we conducted a series of focus groups all across Wisconsin, and it was really, it was great because it was a lot of honest conversations, and we got a lot of the feedback that we had. And there's some organizations that, you know what, we don't feel like we're Platinum, and here's why. Or, here's some things that we're doing exceptionally well that we got silver or gold and that you're not even taking into account. We designed this beautiful environment. We've got walking trails around the office, yet you never asked us about any of those things. So we really wanted to understand what were the missing links, learning from the organizations that have been doing this so well for so long. The next piece of this was putting together a team of researchers. We have a group of researchers at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro, and so they took all of this data from 2003 that we had been collecting over the years. We had over 12,000 people or companies that had taken the well, that had gone through the Well Workplace checklist. We also were looking at applications, award winners, all of that, and so they began to make sausage with this data. And so we published our first white paper. We also assembled a group of people, Dee Eddington, I'm sure you've heard of him, Jennifer Pitts, other folks that are sitting in this room, and really wanted to start understanding not just wellness, but we brought in employee engagement experts. What can we learn from them? How do we create truly thriving organizations? And what is the secret sauce to people showing up and to be engaged and to be happy and to reduce turnover? All those things that matter so much to all of us in our organizations. So we published our first white paper, and looking at data from 2008 to 2015, no surprise, a couple of the biggest challenges were senior level support, collecting data in terms of what is the right data to collect, how do we get it, how do we make sure that it's accurate, and what are the right interventions that we need to be implementing within our organizations for the most success. The good news is, and one of the things that I was really encouraged to find in this white paper, is that the value story started changing even in that time. So early on from the 2005 timeline, most of the value story around wellness was cost containment. And we're doing wellness because our goal is to reduce our healthcare cost. And again, I think that's incredibly important, so not to minimize the need for that, because that is a huge issue for all of us. But what was interesting is that most organizations started to do wellness because of talent. They wanted to keep their talent, and they were looking at it to keep their people happy and healthy much more than they were from a cost perspective to improve morale. All of those more human-centric things really started trending upward closer to 2015 as well. So about 3 years ago, we rolled out the new brand, and the evolution and that strategic priority wasn't just about a new logo, and it wasn't just about a new website. It was about a new way of talking about wellness. It was about a new way of being wellness, and this even changed our office. And I said, we can't just talk about it, we have to be it. And so we, from remodeled our website to remodeled our office to a whole new sort of operating manual at Wacoa to a new definition of wellness, all of these things have been part of our evolution. And so we wanted to really start thinking much broadly and holistically about wellness. And so our vision and mission stayed very much the same as it has for the last 30 years, but there's two words that have changed, but one word in the vision and one word in the mission. The vision is transformative force. We have got to do something now. This is not really time, and I keep saying evolution, but we need a revolution. The workplace has to change, and it's going to take all of us to do this together to really create the transformative force that we need to create a healthier workplace for tomorrow. And then the mission piece, and here's the secret sauce, and you all know this, it's cultures. How do we create cultures that allow people to be their best person, their best self, and achieve their goals every day? It's the one thing, while Getzel might disagree with other things or other names out there that are, there's different thoughts on ROI, but the one thing that everybody agrees on, if you have a strong culture within an organization, that good things will happen. And if you have a bad culture in an organization, sometimes it doesn't matter how much money you give people or how many programs you provide, they're still sick. And they're not going to get better until you really focus on that very core and foundational thing, and that's organizational culture. The idea here is we have to move away from a program-centric view of wellness into one that creates caring cultures. And there's a lot of ways to do this, and programs matter a lot. And so again, this is not to minimize the value or the impact that programs can have in organizations, but the first thing is you have to focus on cultures. And how do you do that? MJ talked about some of the the business outcomes with the caring culture. Here's a few more for you. This looked at when an employee believes that their employer cares about them as a human. The absence of programs, the absence of incentives, all of this, 38% were more likely to be engaged, 10 times less likely to be hostile, 17% more likely to be there in a year, 28% more likely to recommend their workplace, and 18% more likely to go the extra mile for the organization. That is one heck of a value story. And that should matter to every single organization. It's tough to turn on the TV sometimes and to see all the terrible things that we have. But the one thing that we can do for each other, the one thing we should all do is to have a genuine care and compassion for each other and in the workforce. And if we can do that, and if we can show our workers that we care about them and we want to help them be well every day, incredible things happen. And the goal is that we are working hard to say, the businesses and organizations that take this very seriously and that do this are going to outlast, outperform, and beat organizations that don't have a genuine care and compassion for their employees. And so as part of the evolution, the next piece that we needed to do was to put down what we said, here is our definition of wellness. And again, this was seeking feedback from hundreds of people across the country, much smarter people than me, that said, okay, what is our definition? And do we need one? There's a lot of definitions of wellness from the World Health Organization to others. There's a lot of definitions, but we wanted to say, okay, if we want to have an impact in the workforce, what do we think are the 7 components that matter to people the most, and what are 7 things that we think we can change? And so I won't go through all of this, but essentially the definition has sort of 7 foundational pillars. It's health, meaning, safety, connection, achievement, growth, and resiliency. All things that matter to people, all things that matter to every human, and all things that can be impacted in the workplace. We've all heard today some amazing stories some personal stories, people being up here and sort of bearing their souls to things that have happened to them, because the reality is we all have stories. This is the board of life, right? Whether we're dealing with taking care of sick children, sick parents, sick dogs, whether we're struggling financially, financial wellness is a huge issue, especially for millennials these days, whatever the case is, that these are the things that matter most to people. And so if someone's struggling with one of these things, walking on a treadmill probably isn't going to be the solution to their problem. So how can we as organizations come together and say, okay, we understand that these are the challenges that you're facing, and here's some resources, whether it's stuff the community has, but bridging that gap. I mean, EAPs, you guys all know this, they're probably one of the most underappreciated, underutilized benefits that are offered today. The average use of EAP is about 2%. But yet, people need the resources that they provide. So how do we reposition things a little bit differently to make sure that people can get the help that they need and they can get the basic foundational things met too? Here's something else that's also interesting. How many of you have heard of the ACEs study? Raise your hands if you've heard of ACEs. A little bit of you. So ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. This was over 18,000 participants in a longitudinal study. They wanted to understand what are the impacts of abuse, household dysfunction, and neglect on a child later in life, and what happens. So if you were in a family that had either someone that was incarcerated, that you were abused, you went through a divorce, things that are fairly common, you would be surprised, and you can take this free assessment online if you're curious. Google it and see. I bet everybody in here has more ACEs in their life than you would probably think just looking at this. But here's the interesting thing. So they found out that people that had 4 or more of these ACEs had 2 times the risk of heart disease, 4 times the risk of depression, and if you had 7 or more, your risk for heart disease went up even more. So there are things that happen way before the workplace, before we even show up at the office, that are having a big impact on our employees and ourselves. And as a quick side note, I was at a conference last week in Indianapolis, and there was a doctor from Johns Hopkins talking about this study, and it was really interesting. The best solution, the best medicine for this, and the research that she was doing, is resiliency. Mindfulness and resiliency. Again, something that we've been talking about today that I think people are saying, you know what, taking those moments of gratitude moments, taking those moments to sort of change your lens a little bit, taking those moments to realize when you need to sort of back up, take a few deep breaths, whatever works for you, whether it's yoga, whether it's meditation, whether it's just recognizing that you need a minute is important for all of us. So just think about all the things that we walk into. We don't leave our home stress at home and our work stress at work. We don't leave our childhood at home. We bring ourselves to work, our whole selves. And sometimes that's messy. But the reality is there's nothing we can do about it because we're people, and that's what happens. This was an interesting kind of Maslow's hierarchy, if you will, that was presented by a friend of mine, Alexandra Drain, and she talks about the unmentionables. The things that we all struggle with every day that yet we just don't feel like talking about. And the thing is that a lot of wellness programs jump to the top here, this peak performance, this kind of self-actualization that, now we're ready to work out, now we're ready to eat better. But if we're dealing with basic psychological needs, basic safety needs, or just basic survival needs, that nothing else at the top matters. If we work in an environment that we don't feel comfortable in, the last thing we want to do is eat better. I'll give you an example. I was traveling a few weeks ago, and I was doing a presentation, and I was in Hawaii, which is a beautiful place. But the building that I was presenting in, they had the wellness champions there, was made of asbestos. And they had to sign a waiver saying that they wouldn't hold this particular building or organization liable if they were to get sick from asbestos. Do you think these people cared about getting 10,000 steps a day when they were worried about showing up every single day in a building where the roof was literally falling down with asbestos in it? So again, a bit of a dramatic example, but I can tell you as much as I travel, I see this kind of thing a lot where there's some basic safety, or an organization encourages its people to walk and maybe it's not a safe neighborhood. So really thinking about how do we address people's basic needs first. And once we can do that, everything at the top matters a heck of a lot more than before. So all of that, I wanted to give you just a bit of a taste of the context that we've been thinking about it and trying to incorporate all of this into the new version of the 7 benchmarks, because all of those things matter a lot. All of those things are people things, and all of those things actually can be impacted within organizations as well. And so here are the new, and I'll be very brief with a lot of these because this is not really intended to be a training on the 7 benchmarks, but I'll go over all 7, talk a little bit about those, how they've changed a little bit from the previous benchmarks, and some things to expect. And actually, we've got a full certification that is going live tomorrow. So if you get super excited today and you want to go take it tomorrow, you can do that, and it's about a 4.5 hour certification that goes through each of these in much more depth than I'll get into today. So benchmark 1, committed and aligned leadership. So what were we missing before? Everybody's a leader in an organization, right? And I'm sure all of you know sometimes the challenge isn't getting your CEO on board. Maybe it is. But sometimes maybe your challenge is getting your middle management on board or getting your supervisors on board or self-leadership. So it's really how do we just expand that definition and think beyond the CEO or the senior leadership, because everybody matters in an organization and everybody is a leader in an organization. And so it really sort of broadens that definition. And how do we make sure that we align expectations? And that everybody is on the same page, and that we're all speaking the same language, and I'll talk about how to do that in just a second. Benchmark 2, collaboration and support of wellness. So this isn't just about wellness teams or wellness champions as it was before. It's really about making sure that there's a collaborative effort amongst all parts of the organization to support wellness. And so it's not as formal as having these wellness team meetings, which is obviously important as well, but it's a little bit different, making sure that there is a collaborative nature for all of this, because everybody's voice matters when it comes to creating and crafting a strong wellness initiative. Benchmark 3, collecting meaningful data to evolve a wellness strategy. So what are the right metrics? How can you begin to not get paralyzed by the amount of data that you have access to, but to really start dialing in what matters to your people and how to begin to benchmark that over time? Benchmark 4, very much the same here. We've added a few components about creating an operating plan, so making sure that you really have identified the resources, the plan, the strategy. You've got everybody on board, so there should be no reason that you can't be successful. Benchmark 5, choosing initiatives that support the whole employee. Whereas we were a bit narrow-focused on just a few interventions or a few initiatives, but really thinking what's broader than that? How do we address the whole person and not just a few things? Benchmark 6, cultivating supportive health-promoting environments, policies, and practices. This one might be the most different than what it used to be, because this is about, and I love kind of this new energy around built environments and how do we create spaces and places wherever we eat, play, pray, whatever, that help us be well just by virtue of being in them. Also about policies. What kind of policies can we ensure are within our organizations to make sure that there's alignment between what we're trying to do and what employees feel like they can do? Benchmark 7, so we've added a few things here: conduct evaluation, communicate, celebrate, and iterate. I don't think we celebrate enough. And so how do we communicate back the great things that we've achieved within our organizations and to really celebrate that, acknowledge maybe where there's bumps in the road, but also look to the future and find ways to continue to grow and change. You all know this, it doesn't start and it doesn't stop. It's just a constant iteration, and it continues every single year, and having that look back, acknowledging what went well and what didn't, and continuing to change. Most of you have seen this and heard this before. The activity-centered approach, the idea that adding more is better, more lunch and learns is better, more education, more hoops, more points, more whatever, that's not necessarily better. So more wellness stuff isn't necessarily better, but it needs to be really focused strategically with the organization. How does your wellness initiative support your organization's goals? That's when you start getting someone's attention. How can what we do, whether it's innovation, whether it's talents, whether it's productivity, whatever it is, that organizations' goals need to be really closely aligned with the wellness initiative and the strategy for what you're doing. That's really the idea here around how to do that very strategically. How do you find out what the leader is trying to accomplish and to make sure that you align your plan with that? So many companies jump to 5. And I've worked with a lot of companies, and I usually say, just stop for a second. We have to go back and we have to start with 1. If you just start launching initiatives and you haven't gone through the first 4 steps here, you're setting yourself up for a disaster. Either you didn't think about the resources that you needed, you don't have your leadership team on board, the rest of your employees on board, you haven't thought about an operating plan. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you just start launching things at employees. One of the biggest issues that I'm sure a lot of you face within your organizations is trust. What happens when you don't have trust in an organization and you immediately launch a health risk assessment, or even more, a biometric screening at them? it can end in disaster for everybody and really strengthen that mistrust, which can be a problem. And so the idea of the process and the benchmarks, and again, this hasn't changed from the old to the new, is to really be thoughtful about each one of these steps and make sure that where you start is not at 5, it's at 1. Leadership has to understand the value of wellness to the organization. They have to be able to connect the dots. Silos. We all struggle with silos in our organization. Well, they're doing this, and we're doing that, and they're doing this. The idea here is that we really transcend the silos, that the part of benchmark 2, collaboration and support of wellness, is to ensure whether you need to get your facilities people on board, your HR team on board, your recruiting team on board, everybody on board is in agreement and is part of the process. You really understand the needs of the population and how you're currently doing at achieving your organization's goals. Again, it should all be in alignment, and then to create a strong strategic plan. That's really the goal of the benchmarks. More is not better. So we'll dive in a high level of each of these benchmarks. So here is benchmark 1, committed and aligned leadership. I'm going to be fairly brief with a lot of these, but you'll see a lot of these pillars that are sort of go through a lot of the benchmarks. These inclusive and aligned, systematic, systemic, and caring and compassionate. And so for those of you, again, that are familiar with the Dee Eddington and Jennifer Pitts model, you'll see a lot of this as kind of their language. They were really instrumental in helping us kind of put this together. And so a lot of their work, if you're familiar with it, it'll sound very familiar to you as well. But stakeholders throughout the organization play important leadership roles. All of you are leaders. Leadership has nothing to do with direct reports. It doesn't have to do with titles. It doesn't have to do with span of control. It doesn't have to do with decision-making authority. We are all leaders, and every one of you in here is a leader because you're here today, and you obviously care a lot about wellness in your organization, those that you serve, and so it's on us to really be the role model for what we do. It's got to be strategic, like I said. It's embodied in the organization's vision and mission. How do you take that and build wellness as part of that, communicate it as such? It's got to be systemic. So leaders at all levels consider health and wellness. Are you baking wellness into leadership development? Are you baking wellness into new employee training? Are you baking wellness into conversations that you have? How are you communicating? It can't just be at open enrollment. It really has to be systemic so that it becomes part of the conversation that everybody at all levels has. And then the trick is you have to mean it. So it's got to be caring and compassionate and authentic. So you're doing it for the right reasons, and your employees, and you all know that leaders at all levels support employee health and wellness, not just because it makes good business sense, but because you genuinely care. And I don't have to sell this to you all because we're all in the field, and I've said, you've probably heard me say this before, I think the greatest gift to all of us is that we have the opportunity to impact people's lives in everything that we do. And that's a pretty powerful thing, and I know it's hard work. It's certainly not easy for me. I know all of you have struggled, and I think that's why it's so important as a community we come together and help each other, but that we all do it for the right reasons and communicate it as such. Benchmark 2, collaboration in support of wellness. So the idea here is that all employee and stakeholder groups from throughout the organization are involved in planning and executing the approach to wellness. Wellness cannot be owned by one person or one department. That wellness is a shared responsibility. We can help guide the process, but it really is everybody has to own their role in wellness. And where we've really expanded this benchmark is how do we do a better job at that? How do we create a shared vision and a shared role for everybody at all levels to really have a voice at the table, a way to contribute to the strategy, a way to execute on that, and to bring people together to celebrate those opportunities when they can. Collaborative and cooperative, that it's either a team or cross-functional. Every organization's different. It can't be very prescriptive. I think it's what works for your company. And then people have to be empowered. So the idea here is that people that are in charge of executing this have the necessary resources, that they can do this, whether it's decision-making ability, whether it's money, whether it's people to leverage, all of that needs to be carefully considered as you're putting together your plan for collaboration. Benchmark 3, collecting meaningful data to evolve a wellness strategy. I think a lot of people get sort of paralyzed with the amount of data that they have access to, what to measure. The idea here is start small. This is baby steps, right? So pick a few things that, asking your employees. What I've seen a couple organizations that do that's really amazing is when someone comes in, maybe instead of a health risk assessment, you ask them some things that might be going on in their life that they'd be more interested in learning about, whether it's caregiving, whether it's financial wellness, whether it's other stuff, and then start understanding what are the types of resources that you feel like you need for your employees based on some of that. Privacy has obviously got to be, fundamental here, that you can't violate anyone's personal privacy, and that they know that any information that you give them is not going to be held against them, and that confidentiality is obviously paramount. I think all of you are pretty familiar with that. and that employee perspectives and needs are actively addressed in the organization's approach to wellness. Again, so we all need different things, understanding what are those things and how do we begin to collect data and evolve over time. This one is probably old hat to most of you. This is benchmark 4, crafting an operating plan. So again, all relevant internal groups need to be part of this. This is the business plan for wellness. What are you trying to accomplish? What have your leaders agreed that you are going to help assist with that organization? What is the vision you have for your wellness program? When are you going to do it? Do you have a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan? Whatever your organization has is really ideal to dovetail with that and to sort of build on that. And then you've got to hold people accountable. How are you going to do this? Whether it's monthly check-ins, weekly check-ins, whatever works for you, sort of set those milestones like you would any other important project, report back, and adjust as needed. Benchmark 5, choosing initiatives that support the whole employee. So again, strategic, comprehensive, goal supportive, and need supportive. So an organization strategy for supporting employees is grounded in its core vision. The idea here is that this is really sort of transcends beyond just the programmatic approach here. That we are thinking about what are those other resources, and this is where it's really an opportunity to work with community resources. Bring in those other folks, whether it's local hospitals, local fitness centers, other types of things that might be a huge value, financial wellness partners, to really sort of address the whole person and the foundational needs that people have, whether it's childcare, whether it's any of those things, are all important to really understand and to really think about the continuum in a much bigger way to really address the whole person. The idea here is that we're addressing basic human needs of autonomy, relatedness, and competence. You'll see that. So that's really kind of the foundation of self-determination theory that many of you probably heard about. The idea is that wellness is intrinsic, right? Everybody wants to be well. I think we've made a mistake assuming that people don't want to be well, so we have to penalize them to be well. Let's flip that a little bit. Let's assume people do want to be well, and then question why can't they be well? And how do we create programs that they are naturally drawn to? And so some really cool work that we're doing with actually 2 of the founders of self-determination theory, Ed Deci and Rich Ryan. We're doing some work with and some tools I'll be talking about in a little bit that we've been building that are really built on the notion of let's assume that people have this intrinsic desire to be well. And let's knock down barriers that prevent them from doing that and really create programs that we don't have to push people into, that they sort of select into, and that solves their basic needs as well. It goes back to our definition again. Health, meaning, safety, connection, achievement, growth, and resiliency. That all of these 7 things might mean different things to all of us. Whether you're really seeking achievement within the organization, whether you're trying to deal with basic human needs, connection, the power of connection. And I know we've heard that a lot today, and again, so incredibly important. The most successful programs that I've ever seen, and I'm sure all of you have seen, have a strong community and connection-based component to them. AA is a great example of a program that's been around for a long time, that brings people together that are trying to achieve a common goal, but it's the accountability, it's the connection that people have, the bonds they form that really lead to success. Resiliency, again, so important, teaching people to deal with all the things. We can't change what happens to us in life, but we can certainly change how we deal with them. So also very important. Benchmark 6, this was one that I've kind of been loving actually lately because as I mentioned earlier, I think the built environment is such an important place. And a friend of mine, Paul Shala, who's the CEO of Delos, always says, the one thing that you can do to guarantee 100% participation is changing the building. Anybody that walks into those doors are going to be impacted by the results of the changes that you make. There's another gentleman named Bill Strickland that wrote a book called Making the Impossible Possible, and Bill says that world-class environments create world-class behaviors. That he is CEO of a company called Manchester Bidwell, and it is a home for in-transition adults, meaning people that have been previously incarcerated and they're looking to be get jobs and reintroduced back to society, and at-risk youth. And so a place that you would normally think would not be warm and welcome and have all the beautiful things. He says absolutely not. He teaches his folks how to cook. They have a pharmacy tech program. They have a jazz recording program. They have a variety of things. But he makes sure that there's fresh flowers, water features, diffusers, and tries to create a beautiful place for these people to come every day and treats them with respect that he feels like they deserve so that they can go back into the world with confidence and contribute to the things that they have to offer. This is a really important thing here. There's little stuff. You don't have to knock down a building. You don't have to do all kinds of stuff. Well, COA is not a huge office, but we try to make sure there are plants, flowers. We have a diffuser in there, beautiful pictures. The pictures around even the hallways here are awesome. I've just enjoyed looking around at the Frank Lloyd Wright houses, the other pictures of Madison. There's something about that sparks something in us. You might keep a picture of your favorite vacation near your office or in your cube, someplace, a picture of your children, your pet, whatever, because we see these things and it sort of invokes that feeling of us being there. It's the same thing that if you come to work and you got cut off on your way there and you tell your colleague about how you got cut off, it invokes the same physiological response as you were when you're in your car. So sometimes little tweaks to your environment, and I encourage this to be in your home, in your office, in your car, all of these things are really worth taking some time to look at and say, how can we make this just a little bit brighter? Bring in a little bit more light, maybe a little bit more color, because these things do make a big difference. Policy is a big piece here. Thinking about casinos. I'm not suggesting you gamble, but just I'm suggesting that they've thought a lot about how to get people to stay there and spend a lot of money. For those of you that travel and you go to different hotels, hotels are also brilliant at this. Like, I think it's amazing. I love just getting into an elevator just to see what it smells like, because they've just had a good way of sort of really creating this sort of mood when you get to some place, like, oh, it's warm and welcoming, or fireplace. All of these things can really have an impact on how you perceive the world around you. Policies are a big part of that as well, making sure that people feel that they can do the things that you're asking them to do as well. A few things to consider. I'm an advisor for the International Well Building Standard. There's some other great ones out there, Fitwell, just to get some ideas how to do this. Making sure, again, there's some basics here, making sure that people have access to food, water, those types of things. Ever heard of the term forest bathing? I think that's hilarious, but sort of a new thing I'm hearing about, like forest bathing. So now that we're never in the woods, that we just have to go in the woods, does not mean you run around the woods naked. This just means that you go into the woods and enjoy nature, so finding ways to bring nature into wherever you're at. How you communicate, just some things to think about as well there. It's funny, I was reading an article probably a week or two ago that even buildings that are, so there's this whole LEED certification, right, which is buildings that are trying to reduce carbon footprint, and now there's this other sort of body of certifications that Fitwell, International Well Building, that are really thinking about the people that are in them, and there's this kind of cool marriage that's happening between a lot of those, but even buildings that are environmentally and socially responsible, they've shown to have an impact on health and well-being as well, so that's also pretty cool. Some other research that I don't have here, but just throw it out there, is that buildings that do this have shown that employees are happier, more creative, more engaged. Some similar metrics that we saw as well. If you can bring in nature elements, biophilic elements as they're known, can have some pretty big impacts as well, which is pretty cool as well. And then finally, benchmark 7. So evaluate, communicate, celebrate, and iterate. So this is at the end of the year, the end of the period, kind of look at where you've come. We're going to have some cool tools that are going to help you do this as well, but really having a metrics-driven approach to this, there's a lot of ways you can potentially do that. And again, celebrate. Tell your employees, tell your teams, tell your folks what you've accomplished, what you didn't accomplish, what you hope to put into the plan for the next year, and to make sure that there's that constant feedback loop that goes back. That's really important, so people know that when you're asking what's wrong and they tell you, that they either know that you're doing something about it or that you've got plans in the future to do something about it. So again, also really important as well. All right, so that was kind of a 40,000 mile and just a high level just run through of the new 7 benchmarks. There's tons more out there and some really cool trainings and tools that we've got in the pipeline. For those of you that have not taken our new checklist, it is now live. This is different from the Well Workplace checklist of before. Just so you know, it is 150 items, so it's a bit longer and it's going to take some time. We really struggled with, do we shorten this and have a mini version? But this is really designed to give you all a pretty comprehensive perspective as to what's going well and what's not going well relative to the new 7 benchmarks. There is some incredible reporting that'll be built into this. So you can look at regions, industry type, company size. You'll have opportunities that you can look at. And what we're really trying hard to do is to pair resources with those things. So if you find out that you are having issues with benchmark 1, committed and aligned leadership, we have toolkits that will be sort of right there that you can click on that'll say, okay, here's 15 things that you can go in to really help improve some of those things as well. You'll have a great executive summary that you can share. on what are the top 5 strengths and top 5 opportunities. Again, the reporting behind these benchmarks is so much superior than what it used to be. I think you're really going to love it, but again, just word of caution, make sure you have some time. The idea is what's happening within your organization, and how is your organization addressing some of these things. And so again, you're going to find some really great and rich reporting that comes out of that. We've got a new certification, like I mentioned, that goes live tomorrow, fingers crossed. So I'll say by the end of the month, but just to make sure we're safe there. But this will really do a much deeper dive into each of the 7 benchmarks and to give you stories. We've got toolkits for each of that you'll have access to. And then a couple of cool things that'll be coming in 2019. One of the things that we've been really working hard at is understanding what your needs are. Knowing that all of you have different jobs. You might be 100% in wellness, you might be 25% in wellness, you might work for a broker, you might work for an organization, and so we know that your needs differ. And so we've been thinking a lot about creating a new member portal that'll really be tailored to your experience, and knowing that employee experience and member experience needs to be something that is sort of forefront to all of us. We've got a new member portal which will be launching in 2019. For those of you that got your award application in this month or 2 ago, congratulations. It is now closed, so we will be no longer accepting applications for the Well Workplace Awards, and we have a brand new application that'll be coming out in 2019 that'll be really in conjunction with the new 7 benchmarks, new definition, all of that. And we've got some employee-facing tools that will be available to our members as well. So we have been very busy trying to reinvent ourselves, and really the last 18 months there's been a lot of things that are behind the scenes, kind of getting us ready for the technology to hopefully better serve you. And now we're really starting to roll out some of the exciting things that I think will make your jobs easier, and hopefully be able to really re-showcase the value of wellness. And our goal at WCWI is to really make wellness a business imperative and something that we can all be proud of, that employees, like I said in the beginning, demand to work for companies, and that we can really show that companies that spend time and money and value their employees are going to be far better than companies that don't. So with that, I'd like to say I'm grateful for all of you for being here today and for giving me your time and attention, and to keep up the great work. I always love coming to Wisconsin because you guys are truly doing amazing things. Know that my email box is always open, and I would love to get feedback, any ways that we can help you or continue to work with you. And again, a huge thank you to the council and the board of directors here. You guys are doing amazing work, and it really is an honor to work with you all too. So with that, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. This evolution of wellness is really exciting, but I think we also know it's ongoing, and I think many of you in the room are ready to dig in and be a part of it. As you reflect on Ryan's words, please keep these questions in mind. How will you inspire? Which ideas will you explore? And what will you create? Ryan mentioned a little bit about, or he touched on, I should say, the concept of community and connection. And what I just want to mention is that the Wellness Council of Wisconsin is a community of connected employers who are all transforming Wisconsin workforces. So the work that you're doing, and our members throughout the state are doing, is really having that extraordinary impact. And so thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. I want to do one quick thing. Kathy had mentioned previously while she was up here for the board elections, she had mentioned 2 of our board members who are leaving us because their 12-year terms are up. And so I just want to revisit that and give some additional recognition. So if Abigail Nadler and Monica Hinnick, she's in the back of the room, if you guys would just stand, and if we could just give them a round of applause for the 12 years of excellent, excellent service. Thank you for your leadership. And on behalf of the Wellness Council of Wisconsin Board of Directors and the staff, we are so thankful for your participation throughout this day. So thank you for attending, And a couple of quick things that I want to mention. So we do have snacks happening at 2:30 to 3 o'clock, and then of course you have your final session from 3 to 4 p.m. And